Quite frankly, it's unbelievable that I have to be doing this right now. Trans liberation today, tomorrow, and forever.
No discussion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Board is adjourned.
Lindsey Spero, a 25-year-old trans masked person from St. Petersburg, Florida, left the state medical board in stunned silence as he used his allotted time to administer his HRT in front of them to show them what his care really looks like. In a crowded public meeting room on February 10th, Lindsey opened his jacket, lifted up his shirt, and injected himself with testosterone. This was an entirely routine procedure for Spero, a 25-year-old transgender youth worker who has been taking testosterone since June 2019. But it was a first for Florida's Board of Medicine and Board of Osteopathic Medicine, which are in the process of pushing through a controversial statewide ban on prescribing gender-affirming treatments to trans people under 18. The tension in the room was palpable. There was a lot of silence, and about 3 or 4 of them looked away. Spero, who uses both masculine and gender-neutral pronouns, said they wanted to help normalize the treatment in the eyes of cisgender people and inspire others to take action against a targeted attack on trans people in the Sunshine State. I wanted the board to see and be forced to bear witness, because I could tell they are the kind of people that would be uncomfortable with something like that, because people are often fearful and uncomfortable with something they don't understand. But even more, I did want it to be something that would encourage our trans siblings. An injection can be a really intimidating routine thing to have to participate in, and it's even more intimidating to know how important it is and still have people essentially gaslighting you over the necessity of your medication, despite you overcoming all the barriers to be able to get it. This was one big old you to all of that, and a declaration of the necessity and the sacredness of this medication for myself and my body. The medical board's rule changes are part of a sustained campaign by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to restrict teens' access to transition health care. The state's Department of Health asked the Board of Medicine last year to ban doctors from prescribing puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy, or surgery to new trans patients under 18. The policy allows trans minors already undergoing a given treatment to continue getting it and does not apply to cis minors prescribed the same treatments for conditions such as precocious puberty. Yet, although these treatments are broadly endorsed for trans teenagers by national and international medical organizations, the Board of Medicine, whose members are directly appointed by the governor for 4-year terms, approved the proposal. DeSantis and his supporters argue that under 18s cannot truly consent to such procedures, pointing to the relative lack of long-term research into their outcomes and touting testimony from a minority of people who regret the treatments. The governor has repeatedly referred to sex reassignment surgery, which is rare for minors, as genital mutilation. Today's vote will protect our children from irreversible surgeries and highly experimental treatments, said Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo last November. Children deserve to learn how to navigate this world without harmful pressure, and Florida will continue to fight for kids to be kids. Spero did not expect any change to come from Friday's meeting, which was held to hear public comments and allow the Board of Osteopathic Medicine to bring their own policy into line with the Board of Health's. Even so, he drove 4 hours to the state capital of Tallahassee to make their statement. I came to the conclusion that I could give them all the logic and reason in the world. I could offer that Board of Medicine every sympathetic story, every tear-jerking response. I can put my heart on full display. I can call them out for their lack of understanding. None of these tactics seem to have been effective or changed their perspectives in any way. It just seemed like a powerful way to show them that we would be willing to do more than just stand at that podium and talk. We are going to have to take action, even when it's hard and even when it's scary. The board appeared unmoved by another speaker, a trans 12-year-old named Lola Smith, who said, "The most embarrassing moment of my life is happening right now as I stand in front of a panel of strangers and publicly beg for my right to exist. Nothing is more humiliating and dehumanizing than pleading for one's own existence." Leading up to the protest, Spero was pretty nervous and prepared to potentially be kicked out of the room or even arrested and charged with a crime. But once they stood up, they say they felt overcome with calmness drawn from the courage of other trans people, living and dead. "It felt like something else came over me entirely," he added. Draped in a trans pride flag, Spero told the officials that he had attempted suicide in the past because he could not access transition health care, and accused them of sneering and not listening while trans speakers put their heart on full display.
My medication is life-saving. I will use HRT for the rest of my life. Your denial of my need for this medication doesn't make my existence as a trans person any less real.
Unsurprisingly, the Board of Medicine was not swayed, and the Board of Osteopathic Medicine voted unanimously to remove an exemption for trans minors enrolled in research programs at state universities, bringing the two bodies' policies into line.
I'm sorry, it's uncomfortable. We're in an uncomfortable situation. I feel like there's a lot of the public thinks I dislike them. It's not that at all. Not at all, but that's the way we're being portrayed. And it goes on even right now. I mean, you can't even make a sincere comment, and so it's hurtful to us.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
This comment is also revealing of how many people equate systemic oppression with people not liking you. Hector, I don't care whether or not you like me. I care that you're actively working to harm transgender people through policy. After the vote, Spero says board members left the room, causing the audience, who mostly opposed the new rule, to stand up and begin chanting trans rights slogans. Beyond seeking to ban transition care for minors, Governor DeSantis has sought to stop schools teaching children about trans issues, targeted all ages drag shows and parents who bring children to them, and requested data from state universities on how many people they had provided trans healthcare to. Meanwhile, Republicans in numerous states have proposed similar healthcare bans, as well as bans on trans people competing in school sports as their chosen genders. In some places, such as Texas, they have sought to define trans healthcare for minors as child abuse. Just a few days ago, Texas introduced Bill SB 1029 to ban all gender-affirming care coverage for all ages. But this isn't about transphobia, this is about protecting children, right? Because Spero works with young trans people in Florida, they are acutely aware of the effect that the board's rule changes are already having. In September, the Pride Community Center in Gainesville, Florida was vandalized. A rock was thrown through the window and a hateful note was left. Unfortunately, I'm seeing this impact every single day, Spero says. I had 3 different youths who lost access to gender-affirming care because local organizations have been fearing fallout as a result of the medical board creating this language, and so they prematurely decided to remove access for anyone under the age of 18. He says the distress caused by having medical care cut off, forcing patients to live with intense feelings of despair and discomfort with their body as they undergo the wrong puberty, is likely to lead to an uptick in suicide, making this a life-and-death situation he has no choice but to oppose. Spero knows about that firsthand because he is a survivor of conversion therapy. He grew up in an incredibly conservative evangelical environment and was sent to several programs and facilities designed to suppress his sexuality and gender identity, which he describes as a form of torture. Despite this, Spero considers being trans a holy experience. In his speech, he referred to his testosterone shot as a sacred and weekly ritual. Being trans is holy because we exist to heal the broken parts of society, the divides that exist, the binaries that have been built, the structures all around us that divide us as human beings. My shot has never just been my shot. It is being done with the hands of my transcestors, other trans people who came before them, if you didn't get that, and for the trans youth who need access and who are going to need access in the future. In some states, being able to take hormone therapies may soon be banned for adults like Spero. Though Spero was protesting a ban against care for minors, they know they're not in the clear. They believe their access to care in adulthood could also be restricted or limited. Across the country, Republican-led efforts include seeking to ban or restrict gender-affirming care for people into adulthood or placing barriers for adults trying to access such care. It's necessary that, as trans people, even though this might not be immediately taking away my access to medication, I am still going to fight for each of my siblings, because I know that this is my life on the line as well. In Spero's home state of Florida, adults are banned from using Medicaid to receive gender-affirming care. Some states have gone further. In Oklahoma, a proposed bill would make it a felony for anyone under the age of 26 to access gender-affirming care in the state. The legislation, introduced by Republican State Senator Dave Bullard, was met with protests from hundreds of opponents outside the Oklahoma State Capitol building. Bullard's office has not responded to requests for comment. In Virginia, a proposed bill would ban gender-affirming surgeries for people under the age of 21. The legislation was amended to remove bans on hormone therapies. It also states that in order for someone over the age of 21 to receive gender transition procedures, he must first obtain a referral from his primary care physician and a referral from a licensed psychiatrist. State Senator Mark J. Peake, who is behind the bill, told ABC News that he wants to restrict gender-affirming surgeries until patients are 21 because juvenile brains are really not developed as a teen. Because of this, he believes people should have to wait for surgery until they are older. I think making a decision to permanently alter your body to remove a healthy body part is much more serious than buying a beer, said Peake, a Republican. There have been a lot of people who have come out who have had these surgeries and have indicated that they regret it.
Who?
Research shows that rates of regret for gender-affirming procedures are low, like 1%. Rates of regret for knee and hip replacement surgeries are much higher than for gender-affirming procedures. A bill in South Carolina is identical to the original Virginia bill in that it bans gender-affirming procedures for people under 21 and makes it harder for people to access that care when they're over 21. Republican State Senator Daniel B. Verdon III, who is behind the South Carolina bill, has also not responded to requests for comment. According to the ACLU, there are roughly 270 75 anti-LGBTQ bills that are currently in state legislatures or have been passed in the United States this year. Many of these include banning transgender care for minors and criminalizing people who provide such care, banning transgender girls from playing on girls' sports teams, discussing or teaching about sexual orientation and gender identity in schools, and more. Transgender activists want people to focus on the lives saved by gender-affirming care, which has been proven to improve mental health. Research, including a study in JAMA, consistently finds that gender-affirming care reduces the risk of mental health problems and suicidal thoughts. Spero said they had experienced barriers to accessing such care in their younger years, and they believe gender-affirming care can be life-saving. As somebody who felt acutely suicidal, who was placed through multiple rounds of conversion therapy, I can tell you that it is incredibly hard to stay alive as a young trans person. Bans will impact the lives of trans youth, will cause mental distress, and will cause, unfortunately, a lot of negative effects in the lives of these youth because they're not able to access life-affirming care. We're definitely seeing history repeating itself in frustrating ways because we've been through it before so many times, said Andrew Schaefer, the Director of Development and Communications at the GLBT Historical Society. The rhetoric that people are using now is almost copy and pasted from 20 or 40 years ago. You've seen attempts to erase from existence or to erase from the visible landscape the LGBTQ community going on for well over a century. For instance, in the 1970s, then popular singer Anita Bryant created the Save Our Children movement in opposition of a local ordinance in Florida that protected LGBTQ people from discrimination. In the 70s, that's really when I would say the LGBT community was really getting its foothold in society, said Green. It was clear that people like Anita Bryant, they got very upset because gay rights are being passed, less job discrimination and all these things were changing for gay people.
If homosexuals are allowed their civil rights, then so would prostitutes or thieves or anyone else.
In the 1990s, so-called no promo homo laws barred educators from discussing LGBTQ topics in schools. Presently, legislators in support of anti-LGBTQ legislation often claim their efforts are to protect children and ensure parents' rights. We will make sure that parents can send their kids to school to get an education, not an indoctrination, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said before signing the Parental Rights in Education bill in March that bans LGBTQ content in classrooms. In Virginia, where Governor Glenn Youngkin reversed protections for transgender students, the governor's spokesperson told NBC News that the updated policy delivers on the governor's commitment to preserving parental rights and upholding the dignity and respect of all public school students. The Deputy Communications Director for Governor Youngkin, Rob Damshin, said critiques of the policy changes are disingenuous, and that schools will ensure that trans students are treated with respect, compassion, and dignity. Schaefer, a historian, said this kind of rhetoric has been used to mask anti-LGBTQ efforts. They've always couched in the language of protection or, we're trying to preserve some things, some intangible heritage. Students have been active in the fight against anti-LGBTQ efforts nationwide. Green says it's a sign that the LGBTQ community isn't going to live in fear and has the support it needs to continue on towards progress. People are expressing themselves a lot more freely than they would have, let's say, 25, 30 years ago. There's no question about that, Green said. Students in Virginia walked out of school in protest of Youngkin's proposed changes to the state's guidance that would roll back protections for transgender people against discrimination. This effort follows other student-led movements across the country, including efforts to supply banned books to students where LGBTQ or racially diverse narratives have been removed from shelves. I am hopeful not only for the present, but for the future, said Schaefer. The kids are all right, as they say. While I share the optimism that this generation is our only hope for liberation, it would be irresponsible of me to gloss over the dangers that our community is currently facing. Lawmakers are slowly trying to legislate trans people out of existence. This shit is frightening, Lindsey said regarding his protest. I felt as though action is necessary because historically speaking, queer freedom and liberation has never been won through words alone. And I couldn't agree more. Stonewall was a f***ing riot. We as queer people have to prepare for the worst. It's literally never been more important to join your local community defense organization because, as the saying goes, we keep us safe. If you're a queer or a trans person who is in need of a little financial help during these tough times, I have a link in the description to a Google form where you can submit your mutual aid requests. I'll shout you out in a future video so we can all help each other directly. Other than that, please check out my candle shop linked in the description below. I sell beautiful handmade candles that are gay as shit, so be sure to snap those up. I love all of you, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.